welcome to the Master Your Mix podcast. My name is Mike Indovina, and thanks for hanging out with me today. Today, my guest is Mike Pepe, and if you're not familiar with Mike, Mike is a songwriter and engineer based out of Los Angeles. He's worked with a bunch of awesome artists, especially in like the pop and rock and punk world. Artists like Taking Back Sunday, Bayside, Silverstein, Aramosa, Anthony Green. He's worked with members of Queens of the Stone Age, the Get Up Kids, My Chemical Romance, Sugar Ray, and a whole bunch more. And today's episode is really an amazing masterclass in songwriting. Mike has written countless songs, and as you'll hear in this interview, if you want to be a songwriter, you need to get into the routine of writing. And he outlines his process in this episode, and he talks about the various challenges of learning your process and learning to accept that sometimes you're going to write bad songs, and then other times you're going to have awesome songs. But also analyzing song structures and, what it is that really makes songs sound exciting. And if you listen to the songs that he's got in his discography, like he has a Spotify playlist, go check that out. His songs just have this really catchy quality to them. In this interview, he really breaks down his process and how he goes about thinking about making things like the chorus just explode versus the verse, or how to layer elements to make a track sound exciting. He even talks about working with engineer and producer John Feldman or Eric Valentine and analyzing how they would produce artists and the lessons that he took from those people and how he's incorporated that into his own songwriting. We talk about how to make a song grow and to ultimately make something that listeners can just enjoy and that there's earworms to it that keeps them coming back. Now, when it comes to songwriting, a lot of people think that you have to be very technically minded or have a lot of ear training or theoretical training, that kind of stuff. But as you'll hear in this interview as well, Mike is not a theory nerd. He's just really focusing on making songs that have great feel. And again, in this interview, he talks about how he goes about his writing process and focusing on finding the right feel, how he empowers his artist to get great performances, not based on technicalities, but again, on feel. So yeah, this episode, I really, really had a great time with. I think he just has such a great energy, and there's so much good stuff in this episode. So I'm really excited for you to check it out. Let's dive into it. Mike Pepe, thank you so much for being on the Master Your Mix podcast. What's going on, man?
Thank you for having me this morning, or it's morning for me. Thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate it. Just a little bit of a gloomy LA day here. Happy to be here, as they say,
Of course, man. For people who might not be familiar with you and who you are, what your background is, and ultimately how you got into all the cool stuff you're working on these days, can you give us that story?
Yeah, of course. I'll just give you the brief overview of who I am. I suppose that's maybe the best version to start with. I'm a producer and songwriter and occasional mixer that is based in Los Angeles. Some of my credits include The Struts, Taking Back Sunday, Plain White Tees, Cassidy Pope, Charlotte Sands, Mod Sun. Yeah, I mean, there's others as well, obviously, but those are some of the highlights if you look it up. And I mean, my story's very long. I don't know if we want to get into that per se, but I mean, I've been in LA for a decade now. And the first time I came out to LA was about 14 years ago underneath a producer named John Feldman. So he brought me out many years ago to work underneath him as an assistant. I fell in love with the city and making records here, and I moved a few years after that to do it full time here. I was actually a producer out east. That's where I was living at the time, was in North Carolina. I was already a producer there, but mainly doing like local stuff or a couple of regional things that did well, But coming here was definitely, as they say, coming to the big leagues, So.
What was it like working with John? Like, I imagine that would have been quite a big step up, and I'm a big fan of his productions as well. So to learn under that guy, I'm sure there's lots of stuff.
I was just talking to him a few days ago because we're working on a record where we both have songs on it together. So we still stay. I don't know if friends or anything. We don't go out and get like coffee, but like we're friendly, So this was 2011 or 2012. When I went out to LA with him, or came here, I should say, to LA with him. I was a huge fan of his work, as many of us were. I'm from like the rock scene. So, I mean, John, especially in the early 2000s, was kind of the guy creating that sound. Him and Jerry Finn. Obviously, Jerry Finn unfortunately passed away, so that opportunity would never present itself. But John was, to me, probably like the quintessential modern producer, He was helping to define what modern meant at that time. And even now, actually, if you go back and listen to some of that stuff, it's was kind of ahead of its time as far as its production and punchiness and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, I remember even then John telling me every 4 or 8 bars, something has to happen for people to pay attention to. And at the time, we were still in the era of 3.5-minute songs. So there was a lot of changes going on to make that happen. But I mean, I think he was actually forward thinking in the sense of, if you think about now with TikTok and songs being 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes, things have to change every 4 or 8 bars for people to stay engaged. And he was saying that literally, 15 years ago, 14 years, so he was definitely on the cutting edge of the curve of what it meant to be a producer, right? So anyway, it was good. It was really intense. I mean, I was only an assistant for him, so it's not like I was, that's all John has, right? I mean, he's the producer, right? So anything else is everyone just assisting that vision. He was a lot to work for. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was a lot of hours. It was a mental test of whether or not you really liked making music, right? Because here's the thing, back home at the time, again, in North Carolina, I'm from New York, but at the time I actually was producing records in North Carolina. And it's not that I didn't love making records and music in North Carolina. I did, but it was a very much different atmosphere. It was oh yeah, cool. I went to this show and this band that was on a regional tour came through and they're really good. And they came back and they were going to let me write a couple songs to them and produce them out over a weekend. And it was pretty jovial, I'd say. And there was money involved for sure, but the overhead was so low in North Carolina, I mean, especially 15 years ago, it was low. But I mean, even now, the comparison's probably half of what it costs to live in North Carolina than it does in LA. So it was all pretty jovial. And I don't know if I had a perspective whether or not I loved it or not. I liked doing it a lot. I really liked it. And I was making good money doing it on my own in North Carolina. But coming to LA was a real test of do you love this? Because some of these days are going to be 14 hours and you're going to be banging your head against a wall and it's not going to necessarily be fun all the time. I feel like in North Carolina, it was mostly just fun. There was money there, but it was just fun. And not that making music in LA isn't fun, but it's a different experience. When I went there with John, it's it was fun, but I mean, was it the fun I was having in North Carolina? Certainly not. It was a much different genre of fun, if you will, I think that experience made me look really hard if I wanted to do it for a living. The answer was yes, I did, but it definitely tested me in a way that I needed to be tested at that time. I was 22 or 23 years old, right? In 2011, 2012. So it's I think without that, I don't know if I wouldn't not have moved to LA, or if I did, I think I would have had a really skewed vision of what being in LA meant, making records. So I'm very thankful that I got that experience with John,
Yeah. I think sometimes too, though, you do have to have those tests put up against you, to see, because when you're getting started, it's just it's like that honeymoon phase to some degree, right? Where you're just excited to be doing it and be in the room with people. And then when you actually make it a career, yes, it's going to be fun, but you're going to have your rough days too. And there's going to be the challenges too. So you have to put yourself to that test to see am I meant for this? Can I keep doing this?
Yeah. I mean, I think even now, 15 years into my career, or 10 years into LA, 15 years into my career, I think I'm tested whether I love it or not on a weekly basis. I think that's actually a mark of being in the right rooms is do I still want to do this? Because it's the easy days are easy, right? I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do this. Who wouldn't want to work for themselves and have a studio in their house and I make my own schedule with my manager. I choose who I want to work with. I'll roll down to the studio at 12 o'clock, make a song until 8, fuck off to a show. Whatever, anybody would want to do that. So the reason people don't is because they get into a studio and they're oh, this is actually kind of hard. And sometimes I don't actually like this. So I think that the test is, do you love it on days that you don't like it, right? There's a lot of days when I don't like it, but I love it. I don't have any kids, but I feel like it's sort of the same reaction I get from parents, which is some days I just have to love them, which means they're not necessarily having the best day being a parent, but they love their kids, right? I mean, I get that. Again, I'm not a parent, but I've heard that from everyone I know that's a parent says that.
Yeah, I agree with that as a parent. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Right. Yeah. I'm sure my parents said it about me too, by the way, when I was a kid. So, so I think it's just a test. I think it's supposed to test you, especially in a market like LA, which is where I would say LA and Nashville are going to test you in that way. And honestly, if you're not being tested like that, then I think you might want to rethink the rooms you're in. If it's too easy, something I think may be wrong there, because this isn't supposed to be that easy. It's really not. I tell people that it's not supposed to be that easy.
Yeah, of course. Well, even even people that I know that are like the best songwriters out there, like they'll still tell you like they've had to write 1,000 songs to get the one good song. You know, it's like that's tough work. So you still have to build up that resilience, I guess, of like rejection and facing all that kind of stuff, right?
For sure. Yeah, I remember Ben Gibbard, the lead singer of Death Cab. I remember I read an interview with him years ago, and he said that when he was writing whichever record this was the interview about, he rented a office space in the downtown area where he was living at the time, and set up a mobile studio and treated it like a 9 to 5, where he would go in every day and write a song. And he did that for months, and by the end of it, he had like 90 or 100 songs or something. And he said, there were probably like 9 or 10 good ideas in there, but most of the time was spent punishing himself trying to get those 9 or 10 ideas. So it's like the 10% rule, which I go to a lot. I always say that if 10% of the songs you make come out and are doing well, then you're like probably a really good producer songwriter, because it's like, I do 5 sessions a week with different artists. So a year I'm writing probably over 200 songs and producing most of those. By the end of the day, every day I have a pretty solid production rough going. If 20 or 30 of those are out in the world doing well every year, like I'm in a class of producer that's in the top 1%. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a pretty good ratio, because you have to kind of write that many songs to get that many good ones out, So, I always say the 10% rule. It's kind of like in baseball. Like if you hit the ball 3 out of 10 times, you're like one of the best batters in the MLB. You're in baseball. I tell people similar things here. Like if you get 10% of your songs go out in the world and doing well, like you're one of the better producer songwriters in the industry,
Yeah. I think it's refreshing for people to hear it, or it's at least important for people to hear, because you get those artists that really fixate on like making 10 songs amazing, and they'll spend years and years working on it, and then they never do anything with those 10 songs, So
my advice to that, I mean, if I can speak to that for a minute, is every day do something new until you feel like the tank is empty, and then go back to the ideas that you think are good, and then punish those a bit more. But like, I don't know if you're just writing, like if you're just songwriting, if you're just like, I'm going to write an album and I want 10 songs on the album, my advice would be to do what Ben did basically and write a song a day for a while and get 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 ideas out, whatever you need until the tank is empty, and then go back and start punishing the 8, 9, or 10 that are good. But working on one song before you've written the other 60 or 70 for days on end, I think is a disservice to the process, because you don't even know if that's the song that's really that good. Like it's not that it may be, but you don't have perspective to say that yet. For me, there's been weeks when on a Monday I think I wrote the best song of my career, and then by Friday I've written a better song, and that one's actually not as good as I thought it was. And that's constant. I get that constant feedback loop because of what I do, right? Labels, like I said, I'm booked usually 4 to 5 days a week writing a new song every day. So I get that instant feedback for myself of what was good or wasn't good. By the end of every week, or even better, by the end of every month, I can go back and say, those 2 songs were the best ones I did this month. Okay, why were those the best 2 songs I did this month? Was it a me thing? Was it the artist thing? Whose idea was it? I can really study those and go back and understand what made them so good. And that's because I have the data to show. Because I've done 20 or 30 songs. So I can confidently say, oh, this month, that was the best one, or those are the best ones. As an artist, if you're songwriting and you don't do that, if you worked on, say, 2 songs all month, but you haven't done the process of writing a bunch of other ones, I don't know if you can confidently say those are your best songs yet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like people are like superstitious of their own process or something like that. Like just because it worked once, that they're like, that's the thing. I got to keep doing this and like taking forever to do it. Or I don't know. But like,
listen, we're in a much different world too. I mean, like my favorite band's The Cure. I mean, I have Robert Smith, tattooed on me. Like he's my hero. I don't think Robert Smith and I would make a good record together because it's unfortunate. I hate to say that. It's kind of the don't meet your heroes things. Robert does things a certain way that's worked for The Cure and continues to work. They just had a #1 record last year, so it's like, but his process isn't gonna stick with mine. He's done it a certain way for so long and they've had success doing that. But a lot of younger kids, I think, idolize bands that did it or artists that did it a certain way. And I don't know if that's congruent with today's with the atmosphere we're in today's market. I mean, it's not really. Like, I'm not saying not to spend a month making an album. I'm saying spend a month making an album when you know you have the right songs, And also, that interview from Ben Gibbard and actually Rivers Cuomo from Weezer had a very similar process too, those 2 years ago. Those guys were doing that on like 8 tracks. So they were still doing it. It just was, those processes weren't as public as they are now. They weren't TikToking the process. They weren't Instagramming the process. It was just their process. So then they went in the studio and used a huge record budget for 90 days or 3 months to make their album, but they still wrote 90 songs. You know what I mean? It's just people weren't as aware of that thing because it wasn't all on the table. There was a secretive process about it, to them, which was some of the magic of that era, if I'm being honest. Now everything's on the table, which is informative and cool, but I also think that it can water down the of what's really happening.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. Obviously, I mean, if you're gonna write like 90 songs, then you're gonna have some good ones in there, hopefully.
You're also gonna have a lot of bad ones, which is actually the exercise the most. Is actually to you know what I mean. I always tell people, do you have 80 bad songs? Yes. Well, then you're doing something right because that means that you're getting to hopefully your 10 really good songs, right? Well, what do you have? Oh, I have 10 great songs. No, you don't. If you don't have 80 bad ones, you don't have 10 good ones. I can tell you that for sure after doing this as long as I have been. That's just I'm sorry, but I don't mean to be whatever. Nobody just poops gold all the time. It's just not. And I've worked with some of the best songwriters on the charting. They're like not even if you take the numbers out of it, some of the best songwriters, and they have mostly bad days. Most of their days aren't a hit. You know what I'm saying? Like I studied under Eric Valentine. It was really my mentor, if I'm being honest, right? When I moved to LA, him and I I knew him before I moved to LA. And when I moved to LA, he really took me under his wing and really helped me a lot in my early career. And if you don't know Eric Valentine, look him up. I know.
Yeah, he was on the podcast recently.
Was he really?
Yeah, he's awesome.
Oh, he's the best. He's one of my really good friends and also one of my mentor, also one of my music heroes growing up, so getting to study underneath him was euphoric to say the least. But he told me, he's still doing it, but this was, he told me this a few years ago, whatever. So call it, at the time was in the industry for 30 years already. He said, if you really look at my career, there's like 6 or 7 songs that really did it for me. Not to say that he had a bunch of other bad songs or anything like that. I mean, he had full albums that I think are amazing, but really, if you boil down someone's career, his career, who's in the like top 10 record sales of all time underneath a producer's name, he's like, yeah, there's like, less than 2 hands worth of songs that really made my career. And that's one of the best ever. So like you can't, when I ask someone how many songs do you have and they say I have 10 great ones and I say how many have you written, they say 10. I'm like, you don't have 10 great songs. I'm sorry, but like if Eric Valentine can't do that, then so I tell people you need 80, tell me you have 80 bad songs and then I'm going to start listening to your music, the ones you show me,
Fair, yeah. It reminds me a lot of like when I was getting started with my like becoming a studio owner, I hired someone to help me with like business coaching. And one of the challenges that he gave me, my business coach gave me was like, fail, like get rejected. He was like, put yourself out there, try to reach out to artists and like try to get 10 rejections. And like, the exercise is so that you realize sometimes it's easier than you think, and also like if you get rejected, well, like cool, like that was the goal, like no hard feelings. That was the intention. But when good things come from it, then you're like, oh shit, this is actually pretty cool, right? So if you challenge yourself to write 10 shitty songs, who knows? You might end up with a good one in there.
You might end up with a good, exactly, yeah. And that's pretty much what I tell people when they come in and have meetings with me, and that's why I get so interested in new acts. When labels send me a new act, like I'm working with a new artist, a band right now that just got signed to Virgin. They're actually back in tonight with me, and we've been doing a lot of stuff together. But the first thing when we had typically before I start working with an artist, even just for a day or two, I like to meet them, have a phone call, something with them, And one of the things that band said was like, yeah, man, we just been in the garage writing, and we finally got one that the label liked. I'm like, okay, I'm listening. That they get it, like they're on their own. They're writing a bunch of songs. Like, tell me what worked and why did it work? And they don't know why it worked. And actually, to be honest with you, I think most of the time we're never going to find that out. Like there's that story about Closing Time, that song is one of the greatest late 90s, rock songs ever. If you don't know it, look it up. I forget his name. What's his name, the lead singer?
I can't remember his name either. Was it Semisonic that wrote that track?
Oh, Semisonic. Sorry,
yeah.
Semisonic. Yeah. Anyway, I know his name, but it's escaping me from the moment. Anyway, he said they wrote that song, which ended up going like a smash #1. They wrote it in their rehearsal space, and it was just a song they wrote There was another day that they wrote another song. They didn't actually perceive it as being special at all. And at the end of the writing process, they turned in all their day of like recordings from the rehearsal rooms. This is in the 90s, so it's like literally 8-track recordings. They turned in the labeled, and the label picked out 10 or 12 that they liked that they wanted to put a budget behind. He said they still didn't really. The label them didn't perceive that song as being great. They perceived it as like, oh, that's one of the ones that we should do on the album. He said it wasn't until probably very late. He has a book out. That's what I read. That's why I don't know why I can't remember his name because I read his whole book, but that's besides the point. He said it wasn't until very late in the production process that the A&R came by and heard that song like being really recorded and produced. He's like, oh my gosh, this is the one. This is the single. And they're like, really? It's good. Like, I don't know. It seems like a song to us. Like nobody knew that was a hit. And that's exactly what I tell people is like, I don't think it's very rare that I hear anyone say, oh, I knew that was going to be a hit. Like most of the time it's like people believed in the song and they're like, yeah, like we don't think it's a bad song. It's on their album. We like it. But like nobody can say if it's going to be a hit or not. Those things have to line up. Like there has to be a cultural alignment for there to be a hit. I mean, we were just talking about the Sabrina Carpenter song Espresso before we got on the actual podcast and talking about Splice Tube and stuff like that. I would gander, you would ask her A&Rs if they thought Espresso was going to be a hit, and they would say yes now because it's very easy to say, yes, of course I knew that because it's easy to have that ego. The truth of the matter is they probably thought it was a very great song, but nobody knows if it's going to be a hit or not. You don't know. There has to be a culture. I say with every really big hit that happens, there's some sort of cultural alignment that happens with it. Sabrina Carpenter, that's album number 7 for her, by the way. People forget about that. She's Best New Artist, but
fair,
she's
perfect example of what we're just talking about, right?
6 albums. So that means that she's written probably, I'm not lying, probably close to 1,000 songs or something, and she has 60 out in the world or 70. And one of them finally went. I mean, so if you want to really get to the numbers, that's a great example of that. You know what I mean? And by the way, that's over 10 years, so it's like, that was not a quick thing for Sabrina. I remember buying Sabrina Carpenter albums fucking 5 or 6 years ago. I thought her voice was awesome. And she was like this ex-Disney kid, but I thought her voice was great. You know what I mean? She was always kind of famous because of that, but she didn't have like a hit. So I don't think after that many songs and that many times they tried to push Sabrina, because you got to remember, she was on a lot of different labels. They pushed her in a lot of different ways. She had different looks, different whatevers. She never had a hit. So I don't think an A&R could say, yep, this is finally the one that's going to be the hit. I think that they had a good feeling about it, as they should have, because the songs is, you can hear it and just know there's something about it. But it lined up with the cultural significance that was going on during the time, with Taylor Swift taking a liking to her. The video, I think, to be honest with you, people just were in the mood for something shiny and bright because of the political climate. It was just, there was so much cultural significance that happened to that song as the reason why it got so big, So I tell people, like, I don't think being able to say if it's a hit. I actually take really big issues when people in the studio go, like, if they're on my couch, like, this is a hit. I hate when people say that in my studio. I hate it. I hate it not because of not to be a old curmudgeon or bitter. It's just it's setting yourself up for something that's not fair to your own psyche. That's not, today needs to be the day we make a great song. Like a hit, there's so many things that have to happen to make a true hit that like we don't know that when we're sitting on the couch recording a guitar part or a vocal. We don't know that,
Yeah, I feel like so many of the best songs are just like the songs that people haven't thought about. They're the ones that are written in 5 minutes just because it's like it just came out naturally or whatever. I feel like I can't remember what song it was exactly. I think it was Eye of the Tiger, that it was something like they had a deadline and they had like 2 hours before their deadline came up, and that's just what they made up in that time. And then that was like the biggest song ever.
That's always the thing. It's mainly because, I mean, I tell people this all the time in the studio, and a lot of music people don't like to hear this. Like, I'm not really that good at music. I tell people that all the time. I'm really not. Like, I don't know how to read music. I know keys and scales, but I'm like pretty mediocre at it at best. Like, every great producer that I know or songwriter is probably mediocre at music. It's because we're acting solely out of instinct. And that's what my mom is doing when she's listening to the radio. Do I like this or not? She doesn't care if there's a flat 5 in the chorus. She doesn't care if the harmony is an upper third or lower 6. She does, none of those things matter to her. It's just, if it sounds good, it is good. Right? So, I mean, in the studio, I'm not thinking a whole lot about decisions I'm doing. I'm mainly just going off of the gut. Does it sound good? Does it feel good? If it's a yes, then great. And then if we can figure out the science of it later, but I don't even think it matters, like I really don't. One of my favorite songwriters I work with, his name's Lou Aaron. We write a lot of music together. He's the first one to say, he was like, I just do whatever sounds good. It feels good. I mean, it's like, there's times to think about this stuff, but I don't know, man. Like a lot of the times I hear about hits, it's stuff like you just said, or the Semisonic story, or like they're not really over engineering their thoughts. They're just sort of just like doing what feels good. I also think that's something that you can't really learn is taste, like it's like working with as many artists as I do, you start to learn their taste, and people do certain things to music in their brain that feels good to them. And sometimes that resonates with a lot of people. Sometimes it resonates with a small group of people. But either way, it's going to resonate with the people it resonates with, right? And like, for instance, I've worked a bunch of this band on Virgin that coming out named The Paradox. And working with Eric, the lead singer, a lot, we've done 10 songs now or something like that. There's remnants of Eric in every song, right? And that's what makes that band them. It makes them, and that thing they do happens to resonate with a lot of people. So they're on Virgin Records and they're doing very well and those things, you know what I mean? But like you can hear Eric in all those songs, like just his natural taste of things where he takes a melody or a rhythmic choice or something. And as a producer, I need to be able to identify that very early on in the process of working with the artist. What is their thing and what makes them them? And how do I make it the best version of that with the song we're writing or the song that I'm producing with them, for them, right? If I can't identify that, I'm probably not the right producer for them, or maybe they don't have their thing yet. I don't know. I don't typically point fingers, but generally speaking, if I can't identify that thing for the artist, the odds of me getting a good song with them is pretty low, if I'm being honest. But after a day or two, if I'm able to identify that thing, then I know I'm going to be able to get a great song with them, or great songs with them. Even if it takes 80 or whatever of them. I know I understand their thing and I can cherry pick it and start working it with them to become the best version of that,
For sure. So it's interesting to hear you talk about how like you feel like technically you might not be like the most well-versed in like theory or whatever,
I'm actually pretty bad at it, if I'm being honest. Yeah.
but like to be now such a prolific songwriter and to be working on so many songs, you have to have at least some sort of foundation of some sort to be able to do it. Or like, did you just get started as a musician, like just playing guitar or something like that? And that's how
much.
You learned it?
I mean, the foundation is what came from punk rock for me. I mean, I heard Blink-182 and the Ramones and Green Day, the Sex Pistols. Eventually that turned into The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen. This is, again, early on in my days. Smash Mouth, Third Eye Blind. I picked up a guitar thinking I wanted to play guitar, but realistically, I was just deconstructing the songs. I was learning the song to deconstruct what they were doing on the songwriting side. Again, I was 11 or 12, so I didn't really know that. But looking back now, I never wanted to shred. I would learn the song and then instantly forget it and go on to the next song and learn it. And then just pull comparisons out of the ones I was learning, right? When I was 12 years old. Oh, well, that's cool. That Ramones song and the Green Day song actually have they're using the same chords. I may not even know the name of them yet, because I was 12, but like, oh, they're using the same chords. Oh, that's cool. That Blink song does the same thing. Oh, the Cure song actually sounds really complicated, but Pictures of You is in A major, and he's using the same chords as the other Green Day song. That's weird. Huh. So I was using it as a way to deconstruct music unknowingly at the time because I was so young. And that's all I was interested in. Actually, that created a thing in my brain of thinking like, well, why do all these songs sound so different, but a lot of them are using the same chords or similar chords, or they're similar in structure? Right? I was learning what a chorus was, right? Oh, that's the chorus when they go here with that melody. That's the chorus thing, Okay, I get it, Oh, that's a verse because that's sitting here on the neck and he's doing this melody and then he jumps up to there. Oh, okay, I see how the melodies change. And oh, a bridge is that because they're actually using the third chord as the one chord now and they're changing the melody because you know what I mean? I was learning music, right? As a 12-year-old does, you're learning music. But I had no interest in really playing those songs. I just had interest in learning what they were doing as songwriters. I ended up being in a band, and I don't know, a pop rock band, alternative thing, kind of like, we had a female singer or whatever. And we actually got signed to Sony and everything. I was on a band. I toured for a couple years around the country in a van, and we got signed to Sony and did the showcase and the whole deal. And to be honest, there was a dissonance with me the whole time because I didn't really like it. I was like, this isn't actually what I want to be doing. It worked because I think I over-engineered how to write a song to the point that I was writing good songs for that band. I don't think they were great songs, actually. I think they were good, and I think that they resonated with a certain demographic of people. And I think the singer I had cherry-picked out did the same thing. I unknowingly picked her voice out because I liked what she was doing, and it resonated with people. And I saw that, and I was like, I want that, But I was only doing the band thing because I had learned music from a bunch of bands. So I thought that's what you do. Oh, you play in a band. I didn't know what a producer was when I was 17 or 18 years old. But what I did find out was every time I would like a record, I would kind of turn the back over because, I am older, so we had CDs, and it was very often it was like produced and mixed by Eric Valentine in Los Angeles, California, produced and mixed by Jerry Finn, or produced by Jerry Finn. And it was like every record I really resonated with, I was finding a lot of similar names in the back of the cover, but they weren't on the front cover. And I found that very interesting. And I would literally just Google, what is a producer? Like, I didn't know what that was. And it was like, told you, kind of, Google would spit out I'm like, oh, I think that's what I want to do. Like that, I'm actually like these guys more than I like the bands, right? So like, I would hear Eric Valentine's self-titled Third Eye Blind, Smash Mouth Astro Lounge, Taking Back Sunday, Good Charlotte, Queens of the Stone Age. Then I would hear Jerry Finn, Blink-182, Alkaline Trio, AFI. These bands all sounded radically different. But I learned the songs and it's like, well, that's weird. These songs aren't very different. Like chord-wise, structure-wise, they're all kind of the same. Why do these sound? Why is every band sound so different, And it was because of the producer. And I very quickly learned, that's what I'm actually interested in. I like these guys more than I like the bands. Don't get me wrong, I love those bands. I do Third Eye Blind and those bands are some of my favorite bands of all time. But I learned very quickly, I like these guys way more than I like the band themselves. And so I started to just buy records that Eric did, that Jerry did, that John did, to study the production and the songwriting process more than liking the band themselves,
Absolutely. I totally resonate with that, like 100%, man. Like I'm in the same boat. Like Jerry Finn was my favorite producer, and I didn't know it at the time why, but yeah, like every band that he worked on sounded different, and if you just listen to them on that level, you wouldn't have ever thought that it was the same person working with those bands. Compared to these days where it's like you find a lot of producers, they have a very similar sound and that's it, but something was very special about Jerry Finn and the way he worked with so many unique artists and got the best out of them. So,
and that's the magic of Jerry and Eric. I think both of them, I can't say I never watched Jerry, but just identifying his albums and then watching Eric work obviously for years, they were masters at identifying what I was talking about, which is what is this artist's or band thing that they do great, identifying that and then shaping it and honing it to its perfection, at least for that time capsule. I don't think there's a whole lot of that going on right now in production. That's not our fault. It's just where we're at as a society, like things are fast and quick and everyone has access to these tools. So I think there's less of that going on than there was. I still try and make sure I do it even on a daily basis. Even if I typically only have a day or two with an artist, I still try and identify it very early on in the process, in the first couple of hours, what is this artist really good at, and how can I hone that in, even in the 8 hours or 10 hours I have with them, But I think, obviously in their era, there was a lot more of that going on, which is why we see a lot of those very generational records made around the same time, I don't know if we have that right now, like, even going to like a Sabrina Carpenter, that album that she came out with, Short and Sweet, that's produced 2 or 3 hits, is a great album, but is that going to go as a generational album? Probably not. Those songs will probably live on jukeboxes forever. I will say that. Like Espresso would probably be played, I would imagine, in 30 years, I won't be surprised if I'm still hearing that at a bar somewhere or a wedding, Having said that, is that record generational? I don't probably think so. I think there's a lot of filler on the album. I think it's a really good album, but I don't think it's a Third Eye Blind self-titled record. I don't think it's whatever. And again, we're not in a record climate, and I'm not a producer. I don't produce records. I produce songs. Like, I haven't done a full record for 3 years. I don't really want to do a full record. I don't think it's where the industry is at right now. I don't think it's necessary for artists to be identified through a body of work at this moment. I think that it's the identity of an artist. It changes so quickly because of the climate we're in, that I think that it's almost sitting here for 3 months and doing an album is almost a disservice to the artist, because by the time we get out, it's going to have changed already. So it's almost like, what are the quick, dirty ways we can still identify these things and get songs out for artists at a pace that makes sense for today's climate? That's the changing game of a producer. Even when I started this 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. When I came to LA 10 years ago, it really wasn't the case. It's only in the last 5 or 6 years it's changed. And as a producer, you either choose to evolve with it or you get left behind, And like, part of our industry of our being a producer and songwriter is that we're the tastemakers. So if we're choosing not to either push things forward or at the very least abide by the taste that is in right now, then like, we're kind of not doing our job. So for me, it's like, whether I like it or not, and I actually do like it. I think it's very fun to have the challenge of just writing a great song with somebody every day, and they're different. But we're just in a different climate. It's not bad, but it is interesting that what we would consider still, I think, Green Day just headlined Coachella for 2 weeks. So I don't think anyone can argue that like American Idiot and those records are generational albums. I don't know if those are being made right now, So what do we do about that? I don't know. I think Post Malone's doing it. That's one of the only artists right now that I think are making albums that like matter. There's other ones, but that's the first one that comes to mind for sure.
Well, you mentioned like doing our job. Like, how would you define the role of a producer versus a songwriter? Are they the same thing? Are there differences?
There's a lot of differences. Yeah, for sure. I consider myself a producer, songwriter, and producer first, songwriter second. A lot of people would consider themselves just songwriters. I think as a producer, you're much more concerned about sound selection, arrangement, tempo, key, delivery, getting performances out of a vocalist, or if it's a band, getting a performance out of a guitarist or whatever like that, stitching the song together, taking all the different little pieces of the quilt and stitching it all together. As a songwriter, they're more concerned with melody, if it's the best melody that they can do with the artist, lyrical content, it's telling the story, probably arrangement, but not in the sense of arrangement that the producers worry about. When I say arrangement as a producer, I'm talking about like the composition of the music and like how things move between one another, whether that be with different instruments or different or lack thereof or whatever. As a songwriter, I think the arrangement in the sense of like, where does this melody go so we can get into this melody, right? Or what lyric makes sense and is kitschy enough that we can get to this lyric. So their arrangement is different than my arrangement, choices. I act as songwriter a lot of times in the room as well. So I kind of turn those brains on and off depending on what side of the process I'm currently paying attention to. Ideally, I have songwriters in the room with me all the time so that I can focus more on being a producer and then like adding songwriting things in when it becomes necessary, or maybe that I just have ideas for. But a songwriter should mainly be doing the songwriting, and then also they can also, to that credit, throw in production ideas as well once in a while. You know what I mean? It's definitely a team effort, but they're radically different approaches. Also, another thing to note, a songwriter may come to my studio for 4 hours and then go to another studio for another 4 hours and and write 2 songs in a day, maybe even 3 sometimes. Maybe they do 2 songs and a hook at another studio or another artist, something like that. As a producer, I'm doing 1 song a day, and sometimes it takes me maybe another day and a half, or maybe another half a day to get it out the door or something like that, But like, I'm not doing that. I'm like, once the song's written, it's almost time for me to do my work, right? So like, once the songwriter and the artist and me have a song that feels like a song, usually over a pretty basic production loop or something like that, with the chord changes, it's time for me to really produce the song out and get vocal takes and like really make decisions about sound and arrangements and how things move. The songwriter, I like when they stick around, but they're certainly not required to stick around. As a matter of fact, they mostly don't, because usually as a songwriter, you're wanting to go to another session and write another song because you're not worried about the verse beat or the fill, or if we're using a mellotron as opposed to a piano, or if it should be an acoustic guitar as opposed to electric, or the songwriter isn't. They may be interested in that, but they're not necessarily worried about it, and it's more of And it's more advantageous for them to go to a different studio or different session and write another song. It's more advantageous for me as a producer to finish a production and turn it into a record label so that the song can get placed. So the producer-songwriter relationship is very important because I'm bringing in songwriters who I think can get me great songs so that I can produce them out so that we can turn into a label to get a cut out on an album. And songwriters are typically picking producers that they like to write a song with so that they know when they leave, the production will go to the label and it's going to be great so they can get their cut, right? It's a two-way street. We're working in tandem with each other.
Of course. Yeah, I'm always very fascinated by like the career path of a songwriter because I feel like a lot of people get into the music or into the engineering industry, at least, as songwriters themselves. They're just musicians playing in their own bands, and then they want to record themselves. So they learn the engineering side of things. And then from there, a lot of people just tend to start working with other artists as an engineer and like having people bring their ideas in. But like that divide of being a producer versus being like, hey, I want to help write with you, you know, like I feel like there's kind of an interesting, like a lot of people have difficulty maybe even bringing that up to an artist. Like, hey, I think I could write good songs for you when they're the engineer, you know? So like, how did you navigate that part of your career?
I think it was a little easier in my case, only because I was playing in that band I talked about, and we were doing pretty good regionally and then eventually nationally, you know. By the way, I have the most classic, you know, music industry band story. We got signed to Sony, then we lost our A&R, the record never came out, we got dropped, whatever, you know what I mean? Like this classic story. But anyway, so I was in a smaller market than I was in North Carolina. So it's like, we were probably one of the only bands. There was one other band I can tell you that was signed and doing like national tours and actually like doing it. So I think for me, it was an easier conversation because bands and artists were coming to me with that knowledge of, oh, well, Mike, you know, is doing this on a bigger scale. So I want to go to him and he probably has better advice for me or better songs or making my songs better. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, it was sort of one of those things because I started out as being in a popular band in that area where I could come in and somebody would say, here's a song. And I could say, well, this isn't what I would do and I think we can make it better. And here's how. Or let's try this idea I had actually for the band that we didn't use. You know what I'm saying? So I think, does that answer the question kind of? You know, like, I think for me, it was that I never necessarily said, I think I could write a great song for you. Like I never really was shopping myself around like that. As a matter of fact, I feel like I do that more now than I did then. Now, my manager's like, hey, Mike would really love you to come in and write a song with him. But my credits sort of can speak for themselves. So when people see that, they're like, oh, yeah, I know Mike's work. Or like, oh, yeah, that sounds great, you know? So I think it's one of those conversations where I think songwriters have a more difficult time than I did starting out because I was in a position where I, you know, was already doing that and people were coming to me for that. And then that band got big enough where I got noticed by Sony, and then I got noticed by John, who brought me as an assistant. So I was already in rooms that way. You know, I had a different back door into the industry, I think, if that makes sense. But I also think, and I see songwriters now every day around town and stuff like that, and you have to be completely unapologetic about your talents and saying like, well, let me write a song with you. You know, I will say that I think that plays better, saying, let me write a song with you than for you. A lot of artists don't want to hear that one word makes a big difference, for or with, you know, even if you are writing it for them, they don't, the ego of an artist doesn't want to hear that they can't write the best song for themselves. But if you become a confidant for them, that's generally speaking, a lot of artists are very open to that. As a matter of fact, a lot of artists want that secretly because doing everything on your own is very difficult and it's almost impossible. So but the best advice I have for new songwriters would just be to find artists you like and ask to write a song with them. Maybe even ask them to bring in a song that they've already written and let you make it better, even if it's not the best song. It gets you in the door, it gets you in the studio, it gets you in the conversation, and then slowly you can work that relationship so that you can be writing more and presenting more rather than responding more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it makes sense that you had already established yourself as a great songwriter, and so anyone who was familiar with you was probably thinking like, oh, I want songs that sound in a similar vein, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, as a producer and songwriter, people were coming to me for the thing that I was already doing for my band that was doing quite well at the time.
Yeah.
You know?
So that brings up another interesting question, and I've talked to a couple of my friends that are songwriters about this too. But for someone who has had some success with some of your songs that you've worked on, do you find you get a lot of people saying like, I want more of that. Like I want another version of that song for myself, that kind of thing.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
And how do you go about navigating that? Because obviously, we talked about with like the Eric Valentine thing, it's like there might be 7 songs in your career that are like the defining songs, and that might end up being the thing that brings in so much business to you because everyone kind of wants that. I mean, that pie, right?
For sure. Yeah, that's the struggle where we get pigeonholed into doing that thing. That's a struggle. We could do a whole podcast on that question, and so could about 30 of my friends in LA, by the way, too. My response to that usually, I mean, my manager knows that, like, not that she's in the room with me, but she just knows this piece is I actually kind of dislike when people bring up stuff that I've already done in the studio. Not that it's like I get bitchy about it. I just like I don't love that. But it's weird because they're coming to you for something that you've already done. So it's like I can't have that much of a problem with it because like, well, they're aware of me because of X, Y, and Z. Why? Of course they would bring up X, Y, and Z, right? My response, though, is very political. And I just say, well, that song's already been written. So I would like to make something that someone comes in the studio next time and references you instead of you referencing them. Empowering the artist in that way. Do you know what I mean? Like, let's make your song and let's make it so good that the next person coming in is referencing your song because that's what we all want to do. We all want to be the reference. We don't really want to be referencing other people. We want to be the reference. Most of the artists want to be the reference, I would imagine. I've never had somebody say, no, I just want to be another cog in the machine that's making a pop song. Everyone's like, no, I want to be the Post Malone that we're referencing. I want to be the Green Day that we're referencing. I want to be the Beyonce we're referencing, So I just tell people like, oh yeah, I mean, I had a great time with casting on that song. It's so good. It's already out. I already wrote it, though. I love that you're referencing it. I think it's time for us today to write a song that the next person references. And that kind of makes them go, yeah, let's do that. You know what I mean? Like, no one's going to say, no, I don't want to do that because it's an empowering statement, Like, my best, by the way, my best tool in the studio is to always use empowering statements to the artist. Because statements that somebody can't say no to would be the best way to do it. Like if I'm working with a vocalist and I go, I think you have a better take in you. Let's do it again. They're not going to say, no, I don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never had someone say that anyway, because it's like, what do you say to that? You would be accepting defeat if you said, no, I don't have a better take in me. Get me out of this fucking vocal booth. They're going to say, okay, you believe me. Let's do it again. If I say that was a bad take, they're going to say, no, it wasn't. It was a good take. I'm done. That was a great take. Just use that one. But if you go, you've got a better take in you. I know you do because you've done it before. Let's do it again. Like that's an empowering statement. That's a way to empower the artist rather than be negative towards the artist and give them the fuel to do another take or do a new song or something like that. So, if you need to Google, in fact, I would recommend doing this. Google statements of empowerment and put those in your vocabulary. Put them in your phone if you need, in a notes app, and look at them anytime you're in a statement, in a situation where it could get negative very quickly. Like you said, when somebody comes in and references a song I've already done. Very easy way to get negative right off the rip. Instead, positive, turn to something positive and move on with the day,
I love that. Yeah, so much of our industry is like psychological games, like as shitty as it sounds to say that, like it's kind of part of what we have to do. And I think that you're absolutely right. Like when you empower someone, like who wouldn't want that? As opposed, like if someone's like, no, like that was a shitty take, then you've immediately crushed their dreams, and then the next take's going to be worse, and then they're just going to get so beaten up over it that you're never going to get what you really needed in the first place.
Sometimes I'll even be like, I'll kind of put it on them where I'll be like, oh, come on, dude, I know you can do better than that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I kind of like buck them up a little bit, like, dude, I know you. We've worked. Yeah, do give me the real stuff. Come on. When I've met, I would say that stuff to them in the ears. Like, but again, it's all gassing them up. It's not tearing them down. It's like believing in them. 90%. But just to go back to what you said, 90% of what we do is completely psychological. By the way, like I said, I've been talking about this the whole podcast. Identifying the thing they're good at and then understanding how to get it out of them. understanding how to get them out of them isn't explaining to X person what they're good at. It's psychologically knowing how to get to that thing the best and pull it out of them for the day or the week or whatever like that. Do you know what I'm saying? That's in at baseline, that's psychological, like just getting to that. So, I do think that 90% of what we do is psychological, which is also why I think me being like not great at music is, I don't want to say secondary, but I mean, I think for me, I should be such a good producer that I'm running on autopilot when I'm producing. I should be way more attentive to the artists, their needs, their assets, their weaknesses on any given day. By the way, that may change depending on the day or whatever like that. How I'm getting the right things out of them. I should be such a good producer. By the way, this doesn't happen every day. I'm just saying, like, ideally on like when I consider a great day, I'm almost producing in autopilot where I just know inherently what I'm going to do. I know what I need. That shit's taken care of already. I'll get that. What I need is how to get the artist there with me psychologically. So it is mainly that, if I'm being honest. I really do think it is that. As a matter of fact, like the last week or something, I was in a session and there was a session player in the session with me and he played this bass part that I liked a lot. And it was in like Mixolydian or something. I don't even know what that means, but he just kept saying that. And I was like, well, I just feel like the tonic is D, right? You're just going to D. He's like, well, yes, but it's really A, Mixolydian, this and that. I was like, okay. And so I just produced the song out in D major using the tonic as the D. And at the end of the day, he's like, man, music's so weird because like I would never have done that. Like I would never have used the D as the tonic and put it in D major. I would have put it in A Mixolydian or achromatic or something like that, but it completely changed the thing. And the only thing I told him was like, well, yeah, D just felt better. Like it just did. Like I just went from the guy, I just shot from the hip. Like, well, the thing you're saying isn't wrong. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like something that I would turn on the radio and feel like I want to listen to. Like putting the key to D and change the tonic just to go root at D, even though we never started on the D chord ever in the song. We touched on the D chord as a 3 chord every time. Was just felt better. It was just putting the melody in D just felt like the thing. And we got a pretty cool pop song out of it. Again, I don't think that person was wrong. As a matter of fact, they were probably more right than I was. Like they were more technically correct in that setting, but it just didn't feel right. The song was in D major. I was hearing it as in D major, So when I snapped everything to D major, it became a pop song and it was great and it came out cool and it opened the whole melody up and the whole arrangement up and things like that. But that's a great example of me just like, I didn't really give a shit about musically what was going on. And the artist seemed to respond better every time I would switch the melody to D. She would be like, oh, that feels good. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like just paying attention to those things. That's all psychological,
Yeah. It's like, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about like, yeah, it's all related to feel. It's all related to empowerment. Like sometimes when you are trying to coach someone through their performance and you give them like more technical direction, now they're in their head about this like technical perfection as opposed to just like, if you were like, oh, you have a better take in you, then like they're figuring out how to get that and they're going to feel it. It's going to come out in the emotion, the feel of it. So that's ultimately going to get you the better result as opposed to like being in their head about this technical way of doing things.
And also most artists aren't the most musically technical people. If I knew the verbiage to use, I don't even think that would get us the result. If I said, oh, can we flat the third note on that harmony or something? It would, I don't even know if the artist would know that. And it's almost, again, it's not empowering them. It's actually making them maybe feel like less than if they don't know that. It's almost like then they have to admit that they don't know that. And then, but also, even if we both knew that information, let's just say both me and the artist both knew music theory in that way. Is that the conversation we should be having? Because it's taking the emotion out of it at that point, and we may be more focused on the technical aspect of what we're doing, and we may be losing sight of what feels good. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if we both had that nomenclature about us, I don't even know if that's the conversation that wins in the studio. I don't know. I mean, it hasn't for me, but I'm also not the biggest producer or the biggest songwriter in the world, so... But also observing some of the bigger songwriters and producers in the world, those are not the conversations they're having, So I don't even think that, and again, I'm not saying not to learn music. I'm saying if you learn music, know how to also turn that part of your brain off once you learn it, Eric, we talked about Eric, he didn't know music when he started producing, and then he did end up learning music very well later in his career. But he generally left that out of the studio, though. You know what I mean? It's just because he's a very smart, intelligent, interested person. So he learned it because he wanted to know what he was talking about. But I never really saw him bring any of that into the studio in my experiences, like talking about those things. Like I don't think he ever had that conversation with Gwen Stefani. Like, I mean, I didn't observe it, but I just don't. Knowing Eric, I don't think he would have gone there as his go-to. And like I said, even if you could, is that the conversation you should be having?
Yeah. So then, like, what does a typical co-write session look like for you? Like, how are you starting those sessions? What are they normally consisting of?
Yeah, well, usually it starts around 12, ideally. The artist gets here, the songwriter gets here with me. If there's a session player involved in the studio, and in the session, they'll get here too. So there's 3 or 4 of us in my studio back here. I make it a pretty good point to not sit in this chair and be turned around talking to them, because I think it starts the session in a place of authoritative manner, which I don't want to do. I don't want to be an authority in the room. I just want to be making music with you, even though I think the producer is the authoritative figure in the room. I do believe that. I think there's smoke and mirrors in the sense of, like, I don't think that should be the first impression they get. They're gonna be staring at the back of my head for 8 hours anyway, so they don't need to be doing that for an extra half an hour. So I sit back on the couch with them. I typically don't talk about music for the first 20 or 30 minutes that we're here. I typically am gonna ask them about their day. I may talk about I had dinner last night, or if my girlfriend and I went to a movie or we're watching a show. I'll start talking about different kinds of art. I have art hanging around my studio. On my coffee table, I have different painting books and interesting topics that I know that I can start conversations with, and oftentimes most people in the arts can start conversation with. Poetry books. Sometimes I'll talk about Bukowski, I got tattooed on my arm. I have a Bukowski book back there. One of my good friends, Matt Gondak, gave me this beautiful book of paintings that he's done that's like very enriching and interesting. I have like a screen over here that flips through different paintings and visual representations of things. On the left-hand corner, I have kind of a silly corner where there's like a bunch of weird, like, old tour badges of tours I've been on and things around the studio that aren't music related, to get people to, 1, feel comfortable, and 2, get them thinking about art, but not in the sense of what we have to do today, right? So that there's an enrichment happening, but not centered around who's charting or anything like that. And usually, hopefully, through those conversations, things start to be said and their ideas start to bubble. And eventually I'll sort of say, well, what do you want to work on today? I thought that Bukowski thing we read was pretty cool. I thought that maybe we could base something off of that. Or you spoke about earlier about how you and your boyfriend went out the other day and there was a homeless person. Tell me about that. That sounded like a weird thing. You didn't tell me the whole story about that. Like let's talk about that. Or, you know what I mean? Like, just sort of just like getting in the artist's world, if you will. And then, I'll get them talking about something, and the songwriter, I work with songwriters that I know pretty intimately at this point. So like, they'll kind of know what I'm doing and kind of getting the artist talking. As a matter of fact, ideally they'd be also getting the artist to talk with us about it. And then I'll pick a guitar up at some point and start strumming on a chord, a D chord or an A chord or something, like a tonic, like not even a chord progression, just like. And I'm like, does that work for your voice? Is that a good key? No? Oh, okay. And I'll try to. Does that work? Oh, yeah, that works. Okay, well, that's G. Like, oh, yeah, I'm good in G, actually. Okay, cool, yeah. And so I tell the session player, like, can you play something for me in G? Just do like a progression in G. Or if I'm playing in the session, I'll just start playing progression G or something. And then we're kind of off to the races after that, like that. But that's usually a solid like hour into them being in my studio, And then we're off to the races, and then at that point, it's become very natural. Like I'll move from the couch to the seat. I'll have a guitar in the hand. I'll get a sound up, and I'll say, "Yeah, what do you listen to lately? Do you like the new Sabrina stuff? No, yeah, I like some songs in there, but you're right, Espresso's good. Or how about the new Post Malone stuff? I like that stuff. Oh yeah, I like that stuff, but I don't want to sound like that. Yeah, I don't think it's your thing either. But and start having that conversation. Then the music conversation starts to happen. Very slowly, the music conversation starts. As a matter of fact. Oftentimes, just like last 2 weeks ago, an artist came in and sat down and said, "Oh man, I really want to make something like this today. I was like, yeah, can we worry about that later? Like, I'm not feeling it yet. Like, let's hang out. Like, I just won't go there at first. I will not dive right into work mode on music. I won't do it. They can't fucking make me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I won't do it because if we dive right into work mode, like, I just don't feel like I'm going to get the best thing in the artist. I don't know them at all. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what they want to be writing about. We're going to have to probably backtrack later in the session and sit down on the couch later and then undo a lot of things we started on, you know? So like I just won't typically write music with the first hour that I'm here with an artist, you know? But then when I'm in work mode, we get something ideally pretty quickly. Like within 4 or 5 hours, we have a pretty solid song and production happening, you know?
I love that. That's amazing. I just feel like a lot of people would go into a writing session, or a lot of maybe inexperienced people would go into writing sessions feeling this pressure to get something done, or feeling like they have to come in prepared with an idea. Like, do you ever go through that fear of like, maybe we won't get something done today, or is
Yeah, I hate that though, because I'm such a regimented, like, competitive person that if we don't get a song at the end of the day, I feel like I fucked up and I did a disservice to the artist in the room. That's not always the case. I mean, you know, sometimes it's like we just didn't have the sauce today. It happens, you know. It is the odds of doing 250 studio days a year. The odds are 10 of those you may just not get a song. You may not get anything. It happens. But I don't put the pressure on the room in that. You know, it's disappointing when that happens for sure. It's rare, but it is disappointing. But I don't put that pressure on myself. I certainly don't put it on in the room. You know, some days there just isn't it's just not there, you know? I always try to leave with an idea. I mean, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, I ideally have a song written and a production going that sounds 80% like it should on the album. That is the goal of the day. If I'm executing on that, you know, 90% of the time, like I said, then I'm doing pretty good. If there's 10 of those days that don't go out, 15 of those days a year that don't go that way, probably the odds of doing it. Like, you know, I mean, I would say at any career you do, you know, there's people that sell insurance for a living. And, you know, if every day they sell a policy, they're probably doing good, but there's going to be days when they don't sell an insurance policy. I'd imagine. I've never done that before, but I would assume that's probably the odds of it, you know? So I hate to boil it down to something so boring, but like at root, that it is that it's still like we're still going to work. So like some days, like you don't do the job. Like it happens, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you also earlier talked about how like you're not a technical guy, you're not really theoretical, but then you also at the very, very beginning, you talked about like working with John Feldman and how he suggested like you need to make changes every 4 bars or something like that. How much does that kind of advice live in your head when you're writing songs? Like, are you thinking about like...
Deeply.
Okay.
Yeah, deeply. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, no, I was going to say, like, you know, because sometimes you're just feeling a moment and like you're writing a chord progression and you're just like, I tend to find a lot of artists, we end up having to trim the fat because it's like extended sections that just feel way too long and like, you know, that kind of stuff. I find that happening more often than not for at least for the artists that I'm working with. But I imagine that as a songwriter, if you're constantly thinking like, okay, I got to make a change here, I got to make a change there, then it may have some sort of like technical influence in your writing, maybe?
No, I would agree with that. I actually think, to be honest with you, the magic of John's productions, though, that I learned was it wasn't the chords that were changing every 4 8 bars. It was things he was doing in his productions that were changing every 4 or 8 bars or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, if you think about like a verse is probably 8 or 16 bars. So that means inside of that verse, you're probably changing something, a sound selection or something that's going to implore the listener's attention halfway through that verse, then the end of the verse, then half of the pre, then half of the chorus, then at the refrain. You know what I mean? So I think it's less about, but it can be the same 4 chords. You know what I mean? Even just like, oh, let's just not do the 4 chord at the end of the verse so that we go into the pre so it feels fresh again. Or just things like that aren't necessarily technical. It's just like, how do we present this as being interesting, even though it's really only the same 4 chords, you know? Or maybe we add a 5th chord in the chorus or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's less about the technical aspect of like, where do we put another chord? Oh my God, it's been 4 or 8 bars. And more just like, how do we take things away so that things feel fresh again? Because most of the songs I write are going to be 4 or 5 chords max. You know, as a matter of fact, when they start getting more than that, I start getting uncomfortable and tell people like, this probably isn't the way. Like, you know, more than likely. Sometimes in a bridge, I'll allow like an extra chord or two to come in that we haven't heard of the song. But even then, I try and shy away from that. So it's like not about necessarily that. It's about the melody change, a lyric content that like hits every 4-8 bars that like makes the listener go, oh, well, they're talking about something. You know what I'm saying? Like re-engaging the listener every 4 or 8 bars, and less about the actual like technical aspect of what we're doing. You know, it's probably the same 4 chords all the time anyway.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, like one of the things that really stands out to me when I listen to your productions is like you have this amazing ability to get your choruses to hit real hard and real big. And like from an arrangement perspective, like do you have any tips there as far as like creating transitions from verses to choruses to help those get so big?
Yeah, I do as a producer for sure. I mean, there's a lot there. One thing I do in verses and then do in the chorus is like if we have stereo information in the verse, which I mean, I would assume you would, you know, you're probably not doing a mono recording. Not in verses, never panning things 100% left to right. So that in the chorus, when things go full left and right, it feels like the stereo spectrum has gotten bigger because it has. Things are filling up parts of the production that weren't filled up in the verse, right? So let's just say I have a acoustic guitar doubled in the verse, right? Standard. In the verses, I may put them 60 or 75% to the left and right. And the chorus, I'll pan them 100%, so that like we get literal parts of your ears hearing things that were not in the verse. So you just perk up and say, oh, well, that sounds bigger because it quite literally is pushed out further. Something like that is even as simple as that. I would say the things that about my production that sound big are the lack of things happening, right? So keeping it simple. So in a chorus, it's like, let's just say a rock chorus. A lot of my stuff is rock alternative. If we're stacking guitars, and of course I'm going to do left, right, center as the rhythm guitars, I might add an octave part underneath there to add some harmonic information that, again, that's not in the verses that are in the chorus, and then a lead guitar. Now, that lead guitar I may stack with a synth that's doing the same part, but it's doing the same part. I'm not adding another part. It's just adding another sound selection to make it bigger and create depth. So if the lead guitar is panned here, then I might pan the synth, here, doing the same part, but it's making things sound like it's in 2 different places at the same time. Or the rhythm guitar is being left, right, and center, and then having the bass up the middle makes the bass and the guitar sound bigger because the guitar is now filling the center with the bass, Vocals, same thing, Like if we have stacked harmonies in the chorus, then panning those 100%, 75, 60, where if we have a 3-part. In the verse, if there's a harmony that comes in, making sure they're not stereo, making sure that they're somewhere tilted, almost weird. Sometimes I'll do things in verses where the panning is weird, where it's like, oh, that's where the harmony in the verse is like 30 here and 45% here, but in the chorus it's very stereo, Playing with the stereo field, playing with, like I said, layering and placing those around the production so that you're perceiving it as being 2 different places at once, even though it really is only one thing, But, in a chorus, it's only those like, there's probably only like 2 or 3 parts happening. And then the melody, which is the most important thing, But there's maybe only like 2 or 3 harmonic parts happening. The chord progression, maybe an octave harmonic, like adding harmony to the instruments, and then a lead part. So those are the only parts actually happening. Now, again, I may be stacking those parts with different sound selections coming in and out to make things seem bigger and more fun and whatever. But like, there's not really a whole lot happening. You know what I'm saying? There's not a bunch of, as I like to say, shit. Just stuff, Like the death of a good production is just stuff, if I'm being honest,
Fair, yeah. It's all about like how you're stacking things throughout the song or taking things away, that kind of thing.
Like I'll even tell an artist if they have an idea for another guitar part, I'm like, okay, well, we have to choose. Which one's better, the part that you have now or this part? Because like having both of these there'd be 6 people on stage, 7 people. Like, what are we doing? Like, how many parts can you, plus the melody, plus the rhythm guitar, plus the bass, but like how many parts are we going to have here? Like that's just, it's not musical at a certain point. You know what I mean? Like what are the listeners supposed to be focused on? The listener you have to think of as being dumb, not because they're dumb people, but because most music listening is done passively, right? Especially now, most people are not listening to headphones, they're listening in cars, they're listening on their phones themselves and AirPods. It's a passive experience. They're cleaning the house, they're mowing the lawn, they're going for a run. It's passive. So it's like, if we throw too much at them, they're just going to be like, this sounds like a mess. I don't know what I'm supposed to listen to. Next. And there's always a next. There's 100,000 songs uploaded to Spotify a day. There's always the next button. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to be the person that gets skipped. And a telltale way to do that is just to give the listener too much information. I mean, if you ever want to hear a great example of that, listen to Firework by Katy Perry. It's like, there's nothing really there. It's mainly just the vocal, the drum pattern, the chord progression, or Teenage Dream on the same record. I mean, that record, Dr. Luke is a genius with that stuff. There's not like the Teenage Dream, the verse is just a DI guitar. It's not even there's not even a tone in the guitar. It's just literally a DI guitar and her singing. And was a number one song for you couldn't get it off of the charts, Simple is always going to win, The moment we start giving the listener too much information, the moment that it either becomes too technical, like I said, and it goes above the listener's head, or it becomes too crowded and it turns a listener off. So either of those things result in the same thing, which is it's not a hit and you're not getting streams, So when in doubt, take things away. As a matter of fact, I have my buddy Casey, who's an amazing keyboardist, guitarist. He's like Oliver Tree's right-hand person. I'll get Casey to give me 6 different things because he's so good. He can play anything. And I'll just take those loops and I will arrange them so that only one is happening in each section, but only one thing's happening. Even though they're all great, you play them all together, they sound insane, but you use one of the verse, one of the pre, one of the chorus, one of the post-chorus, one of the outro. All of a sudden, you have a really cool song with parts that are happening and evolving, but we're only giving the listener one thing at a time, When in doubt, Rick Rubin says the same thing. He's like the ultimate master of that. What he's what do they call him again? The subtractor or something like that? Or it's like the biggest thing Rick Rubin does is go, take that out. It's like, he's just like, well, what's the song about? Realistically, what's it about?
Yeah. No, I love that. I think so many musicians, we get in our head that we have to showcase how talented we are, or we have to do something interesting for the sake of keeping ourselves busy during a set or something, but it's at the end of the day, all that stuff gets distracting. And
it's distracting. And you have to remember, the listener probably just wants to hear the chorus again. They don't care if it's interest. The interest has already happened. If they're listening to the song by the second chorus, you have them. You know what I mean? I say that if you can get them the second chorus, the arrangement after that almost doesn't matter because they probably just want to hear the chorus again at that point, You're right. A lot of that stuff is ego-driven. It's keeping ourselves entertained. It's feeling like we're making music, even though we've already made the music. You know what I'm saying? It's we've also heard the song literally 100 times during the day, and the listener will hear it once and decide if they like it or not. So to us, after the 80th listen, we're like, fuck, I'm so tired of this. Let's add something. It's like, well, no, we've heard it 80 times today. The listener heard it the first time will probably just like it for what it was the first time they heard it, So keeping that perspective is difficult, though. It's especially after an 8-hour day or something like that. It's very difficult,
For sure. But I love how you put it of just keeping things simple and, almost trying to take things away. And, that is one of the things that, going back to my question about getting big choruses, one of the elements of a bunch of your productions that I really love is how you incorporate electronic drums with live drums. And it's often that the verses will have some sort of electronic pattern so that when the big chorus comes in, it's big rock drums and it's just it may be the same beat, but it's just something different.
And often, as a matter of fact, that's one of my you picked up on that. And not that I'm the first person to do that, but that's one of my tricks is doing the same beat in the verse that's in the chorus, but the chorus it's presented in a bigger way. So it feels fresh. Again, these are John Feldman 101 sort of tricks. You know what I mean? If someone's nodding their head like this to the song and they know where the kick and snare are falling, probably in the chorus, not a good idea to change where that's falling because they're going to fall out of the song, But presenting it in a way that feels new and fun and fresh again is necessary. So yeah, in the verse, I may do a smaller set or just the close mics, or it's an E-drum kit, doing the pattern that's basically going to be the pattern for the whole song. It's just sometimes I'll leave a bar out at the end of a verse, or the pre-chorus, I take the hi-hat out, but the kick and snares only there. But generally speaking, once I decide on a drum pattern for a song, it's probably going to be that the whole song. Maybe sometimes, like I said, in the bridge, I'll turn it around or something like that. But it's pretty rare. If you listen to my productions, most of the time, the beat is the beat. I might be adding a tambourine or a shaker or maybe a different hi-hat pattern. But the beat, the kick snare, that, those things are probably falling in the same spots the whole song,
How much of that stuff kind of starts as real drums and then gets switched to electronic?
Usually it starts as real drums first. Well, I say real drums. I mean, I'm using my fake real drums, I call them.
So you're programming most of your drum
stuff?
They're
my real samples, but they're programmed inside the box. But usually I'll start on a kit because I always like to figure out if a drummer can do it or not, Not because I think that's a mark of a good song or not, but just literally if someone's going to play it live, is this a thing they can recreate? or they have to water it down, and then the listener is like, oh, that's cool, but it's not what's on the album. Because that, even if it's a pop song and not a rock song, that stuff doesn't matter, where it's like we want it to be able to be replicated, at least generally speaking, live, so that it doesn't feel like a different song. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times I'm like, start a beat like on a kit, because I can sort of like perceive whether or not it's a playable thing first. And then once I have like the beat or the idea, then I'll usually decide like how I want to approach it sonically, depending on the part. And also, when we're starting a song, I don't know where the dynamics are going to happen yet. I mean, I'm a very dynamic producer. Like, I love dynamics are one of my favorite parts of producing. Like you just said, like, how can we get the chorus to just explode? The first track on Louder Now by Taking Back Sunday, What It Feels Like to Be a Ghost, I think it is. Eric, the riff, I never forget listening to that album for the first time, because it's and you're like, dude, that's a really cool guitar tone. And then the band kicks in, it's like, bah, bah. You're like, what just happened to my head? Like, your head just feels like it explodes. The dynamics on that album are bar none. Like I always say, when things are supposed to be small, keep them small. When things are supposed to be big, make it big. Like, it's not rocket science, And oftentimes the melody will inform that more than anything else, Listen to the melody. If the melody is big, then the music should sound big. Like, let's make it big. It doesn't mean a lot of stuff. It just means big. Like, big drums or a big guitar tone. Or as an anti-chorus, where the chorus actually kind of doesn't feel like it's supposed to get big and it actually feels like we're supposed to drop off. Okay, well then let's use acoustics and let the melody and the content of the lyric inform the decision of the production. I remember I went to college for music and production. I didn't learn a whole lot of the music part, as you can tell, but I did learn the production part. And I remember this one song that we were studying. I don't remember what it was, but it was like the lead singer says, I called her on the telephone, and it literally was a telephone effect in the vocal. And I remember my buddy, who was like kind of doing the lecture in the class, was like, this is a great example of why we do what we do. Like, this is it. They're literally using the lyric to do the production technique so that the listener is connected to the story in a way that invokes, like, I called on the telephone, so let's make it sound like he's on a telephone. Like, let's literally just be on the nose with it, There's beauty in that, like, quite literally, But yeah, I always tell people, like my interns and stuff like that, when they're in the biggest mistake is not letting the content and the melody inform the production. When things are supposed to be small, let them be small. Like you said, an E-kit, I'll start the beat on a big kit, but then when the melody and the content's there, I'm like, oh, this is supposed to be small. This is actually supposed to be tiny here. Like, let me make this beat, but on a small thing. And like, instead of using guitars, I'm using Mellotron, and let me use an E-piano or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. So at what point do the lyrics come into the equation? Are you usually starting with those and then writing the music to that, or?
It depends on the artist and the songwriter on the day. Sometimes you start with a lyric and then there's no melody, but they just have like the concept. And then other times there's this great melody in the room, and then we search for a lyric for an hour that matches the melody correctly. Do you know what I mean? Personally, I like when it's a great melody first, because I think that what you're saying oftentimes doesn't have to be overly poetic. Like, I don't mind poetry in music. I quite like it. But I'm just saying, like, if it's a great melody, then sometimes the words kind of come secondarily. Like, does it have to mean something? It has to mean something to us, but it doesn't mean a whole lot. Probably not, Espresso, again, we've talked about that song a bunch of times on this podcast, not to punish that, but like I get what she's talking about, but like on first listen, like it kind of just sounds cool and it sounds good, like, and there's also not proper English. She's not even singing proper English, like that's espresso. It's like, that's not even how you would talk. So it's like, it obviously just fit into a great melody. I can almost guarantee when they were writing that song, the melody was in the room far before that lyric. She didn't come in and say, I want to say me, I'm me, that espresso. Nobody talks like that. It just, the melody was so good, that's how they fit it into the song, So in my opinion, I like better when it starts with the melody, but it doesn't have to,
Right on, man. Dude, I could chat your ear off about this stuff. Like, I'm having such a great time. Man, it's so awesome to hear this stuff. One last question then. If you had to sum all of this stuff up, what in your opinion makes a good song?
Simplicity, and I'm trying to think of the word. I want to say obviousness, but that's not a word. What's the word? What's the word?
Like predictability, or like?
Do I just said?
like predictability or something like that? Or?
Not in predictability. I think simplicity and like a very obvious theme, right? So it's like there's no question about what the song is about.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? And simplicity in the sense of like, is it so that message is being conveyed very obviously to the listener. There's a song that I'm in the middle of producing right now for that band Paradox, and the name of the song is Get the Message, right? And we wrote the hook, I hope you get the message. The problem was we didn't know what the fuck the message was. The hook was great. We had the melody, and the words came to Eric and I believe it was my buddy Brandon in the session. I hope you get the message. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, like, get the message. But then we couldn't fucking figure out what the message was. And I'm not lying. I think we did 5 or 6 different versions of the verses before we finally identified what the message was. And then the song made sense. And not only did it make sense, it's a great fucking song. And it's probably going to be a single now because it's like we identified it was such an interesting thing because it's like, I always tell people, what's the message song? What's the message song? What's the message song? In this case, the song was called Get the Message. And now I'm like, fuck. That thing I've always talked about is like facing me right in the face. Like, what's the message, dude? Like, you know, like the song is called Get the Message, but we don't have a message to say. So we had to rewrite the verse like 5 times. And then finally the label was like, you got it. You nailed what the message is. Now I know when you get to the chorus, what you're saying the message is. But we had to break it down. I had to get very simple with it. I'm going to make it very obvious as to what the message was. So I tell everybody the same thing. Simplicity and obviousness. Like, what is the song about? You know?
Love that, man. Dude, this has been like a masterclass in songwriting. Thank you so much for all this awesome advice. Like it's really refreshing to hear. And, you know, I tend to have a lot of engineers talking about their technical processes and stuff like that. But, you know, none of that matters if you don't have a great song.
Yeah, and I'm not very technical, for being honest. So I couldn't even talk about it if I wanted to. You know, like my patch base stays the same because I'm like, I don't know, it works. Everything works. It's good. You know, like, yeah, none of it matters. If you can have a great sounding bad song, those exist. Though a lot of those exist. But you know what also exists are a lot of hits that sound bad. There's a lot of hits that don't sound good. I mean, sorry, I know we're wrapping this up. If you go back and listen to like With or Without You by U2, it kind of just sounds fine. Like it's not like I don't think it sounds like special with the recording of it at all. I think it's good. I think it's a good time capsule of what that band was at the time, but it doesn't necessarily sound great. Bring on the Dancing Horses, Back on the Money Men, objectively sounds pretty bad. Like if you listen to it, you're like nobody really, like, there's static everywhere and there's like kind of amp noise and the snare is like sort of phasey in a weird way. It doesn't really sound great. That song was #1 in the UK for like 6 months when it came out. It just couldn't get off the charts. Same thing with or Without You, right? There's a lot of hit songs that don't sound good. There are no bad songs that sound great that are hits. Like that's the best way I could put that, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to wrap this up, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, thank you so much for having me, dude. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again for being on here, man. Like this was awesome. Definitely a lot of great stuff to pick up, and I'm sure everyone listening to this is going to learn a lot of great stuff. So thanks to you again. Yep.
Thanks, guys. My social media is just at Mike Pepe Music if you want to look me up. Yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome, man. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Right on, dude. Well, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So that was my interview with Mike Pepe, and I gotta say, after that interview, I felt so inspired. Like, I feel totally ready to go write some tracks, jam with my band, and just work on songs. Like, I feel very empowered by him, which is funny because that's what we were talking about in this episode. But yeah, I just loved learning more about his songwriting process. I loved learning about how he makes songs grow and how he thinks about the entire production as he's writing things to understand, like, how do I make a verse sound small versus the chorus? And then what elements am I going to add or take away? I just think that's really cool. I also just really enjoyed like learning more about what he does when he starts a co-writing session. And it's so interesting to hear how he talks about like not even writing a song for the first hour or so with artists and just shooting the shit and trying to learn more about them and see, you know, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What's going on in their world? Because if you tap into that energy, then you're going to get something that feels authentic and that really taps into the true feelings that someone going through a similar situation would experience. So yeah, I just thought that was a really refreshing way of songwriting. And if you listen to his music, you'll feel the energy that the singers are singing about. You'll feel the size of the mixes get bigger and how that even relates to what's happening lyrically. So yeah, it was really interesting to learn more about his process. And like I said, I just feel like very empowered by that. And it makes sense. That's what he talked about. Like, not talking negatively or getting technically minded, just really focusing on positivity in the studio, empowering people. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was also very fascinating to learn more about his experiences working with people like John Feldman and Eric Valentine. Both of those producers are people who I really admire. So to have someone who has had the ability to work with them and learn from them and see how they've treated sessions behind the scenes, that's also really cool. So yeah, I just really, really enjoyed this episode. And I hope that as you listen to this episode, you were able to pick up on a lot of great tips and techniques that you can incorporate into your own songwriting. Now, with that said, once you have a great song, a great recording is going to help elevate that. And if you are someone who has a lot of songs written, or even if you just have one song ready, but you really want it to sound pro and you're not sure of what to do, well, inside of my coaching program, Amplitude, that's exactly what I work on with my students. I help you get your vision to come to life and to get the emotional content of your songs to stand out and feel polished, and to ultimately record, edit, and mix your tracks so that everything sounds clear, everything sounds big and focused, and that again, your vision comes to life and you hear the sound that you hear in your head coming out of your speakers. Now, if you're interested in getting one-on-one help throughout that process, if you want someone that can show you a beginning to end process and give you feedback along the way as you implement that process, then make sure to check out MasterYourMix.com/amplitude. And on that page, you'll find all the details about my program. And there's also a button on that page where you can apply for the program and hop on a call with me and book time with me. I'd love to learn more about you. I'd love to know more about the kind of music you're working on. I'd love to know what's working for you, what you're struggling with, and ultimately how I can help you get the most out of your music so that you can finish more songs, get them out there, and, like Mike talked about in this interview, start working on more, because that's what this is all about, right? We all want to just get our emotions and excitement out in the world. So what better way to do that than through music, right? So if you're interested in learning more about getting one-on-one help with your recordings and your mixes from home, make sure to check out MasterYourMix.com/amplitude. And with that said, we've reached the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I can't wait to chat with you in the next one. We'll talk soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Master Your Mix podcast. Please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a review. If you have any questions or comments for the podcast, send an email to questions@masteryourmix.com. And for more information on how to create pro recordings from your home studio, visit MasterYourMix.com.